Hello and welcome to Setting the Stage, episode 24, Kernel and the Final Lands. We are looking for more people to interview, so if you're a DM or you know a DM that might be interested in coming on the show, you can check out more about how to apply at www.gocorral.com/sts. And without any further ado, let's get into the show. Hi, I'm here today with Kernel, who's going to tell us about his D&D campaign. But we always want to talk a little about who you are outside of D&D first, so you want to give us a little bit of details about that?
Yeah, I'm 31, graduated with a degree in social work, but now I kind of just focus on like DMing for my friends. I have a very active guild community.
Mm-hmm. Do you DM like professionally? Is that what you meant by like moving out of social work to do that?
No, it's the social work it's a very rough job to do. It's very emotionally draining.
Oh yeah, definitely.
I've been DMing for almost 20 years now. Started in third edition or 3.5. I got my first D&D product for, I think it was Easter of 2004. It was a D&D 3.5 starter set.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember reading it and like looking at all the pre-made characters, and I was like, this character, specifically the warrior character, the human warrior with like the great sword and stuff. I was like, this would be really cool if I could just change him just a little bit. And so then I got the books, and I would read. I was the only one of my friends boring enough to read the books.
This is third edition?
3.5.
Yeah, okay.
Sadly, I don't think I was really reading much when third edition was out and popular.
Well, I don't really see a difference between third edition and 3.5, to be honest.
I've honestly never even read any of the old materials for 3.
There was very limited changes. Like you could probably list the top 5 and that would cover most of it.
But so I had this like personal interest in D&D where like I was reading the books and trying to set up campaigns with my friends, but they were all like, "Oh, it's nerd stuff. This is too much math." They would look at it like, "Oh, we have to roll dice and add them up. Too much math."
Yeah.
But my dad was an engineer at the time, and he had lots of nerdy friends at his workplace. So one of his work friends took me and my dad, and sat us down and taught us to play D&D and walked us through a session or two. And that like really sparked my interest in not just playing D&D, but being the one to like lay out this experience and like let people explore whatever they want to do in the game through the setting that I'm essentially acting like a human processor for.
Right. Yep.
So like I went back to my friends in school and basically convinced them all to play. And that's a very routine thing with me where I will meet new people, and within a few months we'll be rolling up some characters for a goofy session, and then after a few goofy sessions it gets kind of serious, and we break into a real storyline. And I've introduced
typical.
dozens of people to D&D that way.
So you started off as DM, is that right?
I was DM from almost day one.
I'm guessing you must have done some playing.
Yeah.
But you're primarily still DM, I'm guessing, from what you're saying.
Yeah, I'm still a DM mostly. In the current series of campaigns that I run with my guild, there's multiple DMs, and I will occasionally ask to be a player in those. But I'm the most active DM and host the most sessions. So like they might host a session once every 3 or 4 months, and I'll try to sneak my PC into that. But other than that, I'm the one organizing things.
Okay. So you said it's a guild, so is this like made up of a group of people that you've met over the years?
Yeah,
is it like online folks?
It's online folks. Focus on the upcoming MMO Ashes of Creation. We use that setting for a lot of campaigns and stories that we're kind of expanding on our guild history before the game comes out. So when the game does come out, we have all this lore backing up why we do X, Y, and Z, why our traditions are this way, why are the roles named the way they are, and we have all that. Players have acted it out over months and years in the past.
Yeah, pretty cool. Is that something where like you can work with the creators of Ashes of Creation to like get that guild into the game, or is this all just like your own stuff that you're gonna have?
We have a very large presence in the official like Ashes community, and we have a lot of our art, like almost half of the art in like the pre-scroll for the streams is stuff we've commissioned for our campaigns.
Wow, okay.
But this is all like prehistory for the whatever happens in the game. Like it's
Right,
all
right.
before anything that's actually going to happen in world is even exists. So this is all just lore and backstory for our own sake more than anything.
Right.
And it's because we want to be invested, and when we go into the actual game, we want to have that backing of real history because we actually spent years playing these games.
Right, right. Yeah, I read a little bit about the MMO when you talked about it in the survey. And yeah, it sounds pretty interesting, and having that kind of investment into it makes it a much more like compelling world compared to like World of Warcraft, where you can ignore the lore and probably still do fine with whatever you want to do.
Yeah, the lead designer, Steven, based the entire game off of a Pathfinder campaign that he ran. Yeah,
Oh, that's cool.
multiple areas in the campaign world or in the game are named after places in his campaign, like the tabletop mountains and stuff like that.
The tabletop mountains.
Yes, giant, very very high plateaus.
Uh-huh. I can sort of see why you would name it that, like in universe, but it definitely feels like a tongue-in-cheek joke. But all right, yeah.
Every year, the Ashes team have this. It's usually around Christmas. It's like a big celebration stream where they will get on and run I think it's usually a Pathfinder campaign in the setting and like announce new lore things through that.
Okay, that's cool. So this is kind of like Living Greyhawk was what they called it for third edition, but as an MMO at this point, and then eventually like all these different groups are going to combine everything for the lore in the universe. Is that right?
Not quite. They have their own like set storyline of like what's officially happened, but there's always room in there for micro stories, which compared to
Okay.
like the narrative of like gods doing stuff and destroying the world, what the little wars, our guild fights are very micro in comparison.
Well, yeah, that's pretty cool. You mentioned this in the survey and like the little email chat we had about wanting to more focus on your personal world instead of the Ashes of Creation stuff. Yeah.
Let me get my notes up because I use this thing called Campfire to organize all
Uh-huh.
my D&D
Yeah, I've heard
notes.
of that.
It's really good. Like I've written more for my latest campaign than I ever have in like other physical notes or that kind of thing with this
Mhm.
program, especially because like it links between mobile and desktop and as many devices as you want to put on there. So
Yeah, yeah, that's pretty cool. Do your writing wherever you are.
hmm like just write a few sentences when you're in the restroom.
Yeah, yeah, I've done the same thing for mine, but with my blog app instead,
Mm.
or just the Notes app on my phone. That works good too.
Yeah, I used to use like this Samsung Notes app, but stopped using Samsung phones, and those notes are kind of hard to get.
Yeah, whenever I was doing that, I always had to transfer it to something else later. It's just.
I used Google Docs for the longest because I could do that kind of
Hmm.
same thing where I could open it in my mobile device and type and then come back and like edit it on my desktop.
Yeah, yeah. I probably should do that. I just have my campaign drive is shared with my players, so if I'm doing like a DM stuff, I want it to not be shared. I probably could set up the drive where that would be fine, but
Yeah, you
I
can
just
have
never
like
have.
permissions in the drive where you can have like folders that only you can see.
Right, yeah. Just never bothered.
All right,
Hmm.
let me actually look how many words I have written in this campaign because it'll tell me like on the dashboard how many words and hours I've actually put into this project.
Right.
146,000 words, 456 hours, 273 individual elements.
That's a lot.
Mm-hmm.
That's cool. Campfire does that.
Yeah.
That's kind of like how Wikipedia does that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, neat. I'm sure a lot of DMs have similar numbers, but being able to actually track it is pretty
Oh
cool.
yeah, it's like a little dashboard and everything. Got like a most recent edits. You can pin like important notes.
Yeah.
As we have like players come in and out of the guild, like their stories kind of come and go into the campaign too. So we have I think 30 player sheets in the guild,
Hmm.
but only about 12 to 15 active who like
Right. Yeah.
come to every session basically and try to get their their self known.
Okay. Cool. Cool. So even with that many active players, are you doing like 2 or 3 sessions a week, or what's the
I
what's the
try to
rate,
get
the frequency?
I try to get one session every 2 weeks, and that usually
Okay.
has between like 3 and 5 people. And
Okay.
one of my favorite things to do after a session is I have a really big narrative write up where I essentially recap the entire plot and actions of the whatever happened that session. Let's say they go and take out an orc camp. I write like a little narrative what happened, and then I post it so everyone who didn't show up and didn't read or even doesn't care can go back and read. Oh, this date they had this session where they did this. Next date this session did this, and they all like you could essentially like make a line from the beginning of the campaign to the very end.
Okay. Yeah, that's I do that kind of thing too, but that's usually for like the one person that missed, not the 25.
Well, there's a lot of people who they're like, oh, I have no interest or no time to play D&D, but they care so much about the lore. And I'm like, well, you'd want to know that we named this role this because this person did this cool thing.
Yeah, and I imagine there's some people that are interested in eventually just being part of the MMO and wanting to follow along for that.
Mm-hmm.
Or, like you said, maybe just enjoying it kind of in the same way that people enjoy this podcast.
I was never really into role-playing in an MMO. I'd never done it before. But this group kind of got me into that, and how the regular D&D principles just can transfer really well as long as you can type and act things out. Then all the other stats and everything still track and will translate essentially the same to whatever you're doing. So you just have a visual representation of whatever you're doing in the MMO.
Right.
It's a little wonky sometimes, but there's a lot of people who really enjoy it, and they can't get into it if they're looking at a drawn map on Roll20.
Yeah, it's definitely can be more visceral with that experience.
Moving on to my campaign world.
Yes, exactly. What is your campaign world called?
So the actual landmass that most of the campaign takes on doesn't have a real name. The people living there don't name it. They don't really care. But I call it the Final Lands because it essentially comes from a world where every other habitable part of the world has been consumed by some kind of catastrophe, forcing all the different races to come to this island no bigger than like England or Ireland, like a very compact island that's pretty dense with stuff. All the races have their own like, oh, this is our tragedy that brought us. The dwarves survived a flood, dug tunnels through the mountains, and ended up in the World's Teeth Mountains, where they live in the most desolate part of the island. The orcs are very religious, and they believe that the gods ordered them to flee to this island and bring others as well. The elves think that they're being persecuted and have followed a very fanatical king all the way to this island and have set up their own like dynasty.
Okay.
The island I have divided into 4 or 5 equal parts. Basically, there's the north, the south, the east, the west, and the center. The center is the most important part of the island. It's a very desolate wasteland that actually is hostile to most forms of life. Being in the wasteland kind of like drains your life force, and you just lose the will to live the longer you're there. So like no one settles there. And when the party goes into this area, they have a limited amount of time to do something before they have to either retreat or suffer serious consequences.
Right.
In the center of the island is the Forge of Soul, which is like a dark crystal tower that's risen out of the ground and has always been there as far as the people of the island know. And every 2 years, this massive comet, larger than the moon, like passes over the sky to signal the beginning of the trials. And all the individual communities or nations send parties to try to reach the top of the tower and like get the favor of the gods so they can prosper in the next 2 years before the next event.
Okay. All right, so it's just a single like kind of circular oval continent. Is there any like interesting
roughly circular
geography to it?
The north is very mountainous, called the World's Teeth Mountains. The very far east is a red desert called the Burning Plains. It's very unforgiving and populated with a lot of fierce beasts. There's only like one oasis in the middle of the Burning Plains where all these tribes gather around and like trade and stuff.
It's funny you talked about all these people that like came here from other disasters, and that doesn't sound like this place is that great to be.
Well, like the outside of the island, the sea literally boils, so people can't like.
Oof.
There's not a lot of. The only part of the island has like any kind of naval travel is the south called Freeport, which is where
Mhm.
the humans kind of gathered and created the city of Freeport on the Liberty Delta, where they're escaping from like persecution at the hands of other races and are very like it's essentially like a libertarian Bitcoin compound they formed where
Okay.
everything is contracts. You can sign a contract with another person to do anything. They're very trade focused, so they're the only kind of people who even bother to sail the seas, and they can't sail out very far because the sea boils. There's sea dragons, which patrol
Of
the
course.
coast. Freeport's probably the most detailed area I have of the campaign map because that's where a lot of my parties have spent the most of their time. Towards the east is like this massive forest called the Starlight Forest, where the
Uh-huh.
elves have taken kind of refuge. There's also like some plains to the northeast and northwest where several mixed villages kind of live that have their own little stories. Like in the very
Okay.
northeast of the continent, well, not continent, island, there's a pilgrimage site called the End of the World, where that's where the orcs first landed when they came from their disaster, and a contingent of priests have like stayed to like essentially pray for the world outside the island. And when my party goes there, that's how they learn. That's the most place where they like, oh, we'll tell you the history of the world before we all got to the island. It all sucked and stuff. So the
Mm.
other places they don't care as much about outside of the island. They're like, I'm on this island and we're going to get to the Soul Forge and we're going to get our wish granted. Um,
Woo.
because that's when they're going to get when the party gets to the top of the tower, they are essentially granted a wish. There's
Okay.
because this event in lore has run for so many times before. There's a history of like past winners. So
Oh, cool.
there's a warlord called Thomas Blade. He was one of the first people to win to take a group to the top of the tower and get a wish. He essentially wished immortality for himself, and
Okay.
it's not like a true immortality. It's more like a non-aging kind of thing, where he can still
Okay.
be
Yeah, yeah.
killed. He just can't die naturally. So now he controls Blade's mercenaries, which is like a group that he sends out to essentially get him money and like bring people back that he recruits into something he calls the Band of Bastards, which is a group that tries every time there's this world event where you get to the top of the tower and get a wish. He sends a group to try to take it for him and wish for stuff for him.
Mhm.
And so in the story, the party that I played with, they are one of the groups from one nation or another, depending on like what races everybody picks and what stories they kind of go with. I'm like, okay, your group starts here, and one of their first objectives is to either become the like official champions of wherever they're coming from, or to find a reason compelling enough to make their group go to the tower. Like the story all came about because
Uh-huh.
my group of friends who I had at the time, we had all been playing. It was about 2014, and we had all been playing some specific games that made us want to not just play D&D, but have a kind of free for all story. Like so, we all played games like Planescape Torment, um,
Uh-huh. Yeah, yeah, that's a good one.
Divinity Original Sin.
Also good.
So they were like, "This game is cool," and I'm like, "Guys, this game is just D&D. We could just play D&D." They're like, "No way! D&D can do this? You can murder a whole village in D&D?" I'm like, "I guess if that's what you choose." So we after about 2 sessions, we stopped using free XP or enemy XP, and I'm like, "Okay, you're only leveling up on milestones now." Because
Okay. Yeah.
they were like, oh yeah, we helped escort these people. We can kill him and get the XP. He's an orc that gives X amount of XP. Like,
Oh my God.
not in this game, Buckaroo.
Oh boy.
But
Yeah, that's
another reason that 4E was very popular at the time because it was the first time there had been like an online portal to like you could build a character in 5 minutes in this online portal for D&D 4E. I think
mhm.
it was D&D Next or it was like the whatever was before D&D Beyond. Those little subscription things. So that's how we made our characters and could get
Mhm.
people into it so fast. and then like the video game aspect of like the cards that you got, like all your skills are represented in like some card or ability name.
Was it called Insider? I'm trying to remember the name too.
I think it was Next.
Yeah, that might have been it. Okay, well, whatever. Yeah, the cards were a pretty sweet
It was
system there.
just when you translate, like it directly translated from video games. So that's why I was like, this is really good to just hook people in with. This is very simple; they can get it.
Mm-hmm. Yep, yep. Yes, it's very similar to like the cooldown ability aspects in World of Warcraft.
Yeah, so that's how I roped these people into playing games with me. It's like my cousin, some friends.
Yeah, it's just a video game, but you get to jump when you don't get to jump in the other game.
Yeah,
Yeah, that was one that always frustrated me when I was that I felt like was like a good addition because like there's this like meme of Fallout where there's a door that has like a master lock on it, but the window is broken, so it's like how can I not just get into this room? The window is broken, but the game says you can't. That's why.
yeah.
Okay, so there's like this big contest where everyone gets to make a wish if they win. So that's why a bunch of people enter the contest is because they get a wish. And are there really any limits on that wish? Like, could you wish to like be a god
There's
or to
there's some limits.
make the sea not boiling?
There are some limits, but a lot of the people who get the wish are sent specifically by these nations to like help my nation. You know, the elves want this parcel of land, and I've been promised X, Y, and Z if I get it. So I'm gonna go win the. All of them don't know that it's an actual wish. They just think it's the favor of the gods. But in the end, it's essentially
Mm,
they just cast wish on you, and you get you get what you wish for. But the point is they want it for their nation, their town, or whatever to expand, to do better. The warlord wants it to improve his life.
right.
But my party, like they essentially like got wind that it was a wish, and they were going to wish to like stop the contest. And I was like, that could be interesting if they actually got there. But I made sure to throw up a lot of road signs that essentially encourage them gently to change.
Okay. So you talked in your survey about how the races are kind of like traditional. Is there anything more about that, like dwarves in the mountains, elves in the forest, that kind of
The
thing?
only thing that kind of separates from tradition, according to like natural D&D thing, is like orcs are not as violent and kind of selfish as in classic D&D. These orcs are more like
Uh-huh.
like druids and very in touch with like the land and honor and like family and stuff. And they kind of like
Mhm.
do their own thing, and they're very distrustful of other people because they've been hurt so many times.
I see.
But I have multiple factions of like humans and elves. Like so there's the elves, the royal elves who live in the Starlight Forest. They're very uptight, pompous, classic high elves. But there is another forest that was actually made through a wish at the tower called the Bohemian Grove. It is a slightly more mystical forest with a lot of psychoactive plants and kind of dangerous creatures, where the elves who live there are kind of like I don't know, like a hippie Woodstock type who kind of like commune with the forest, and like this
Okay.
forest is everything we need, dog.
Yeah, man.
I had a character come from the Bohemian Grove, and he was a bit of a an interesting aspect, always looking for some kind of, how do I put this? They're very pleasure seeking, so they always want like the best food, the best drink.
Epicurean. That's the.
Epicurean, yeah, there we go. My world takes some influences from, well, specifically like Warhammer Fantasy,
Uh-huh.
and like Final Fantasy 14, like with how
Okay.
some of the elements and the gods work.
Okay.
So like they're very much like essentially not like corrupted elves, but like really out of touch, kind of selfish, haughty, always seeking the best of everything, perfectionists. And they don't
Gotcha.
even send people usually to the contest anymore because their force is everything they need.
Oh, well, yeah. I
There,
guess that makes sense.
yeah, so there's the libertarian humans in the Freeport south section of the the island, but in the Burning Plateau where there's this desert and there's single oasis called Mundian, there's like nomadic, kind of like Arabic Sephardic type of humans who have these caravans that go around and like collect all the rare spices. The desert is red because it has iron oxide in the sand.
Right.
So they have these giant like wagon trowels that like scoop up sand and they process it into special iron that they use. And the only like fixed city is the one around the oasis.
You said Sephardic. Do you mean like safari?
No, it's Israeli Palestinian kind of
Okay.
North Arab type of, what's it called? This is what that area is called. It's called like Sephardic areas.
All right. All right. And the gods. I understood that was kind of a complex situation for your
It
world. Do you want to get into
it
that?
is because in the world that most of the campaign takes place on, the gods are just belief. They have no, there's no like this is the god, and here's what he truly stands for. They're all like, oh, this group kind of believes this group believes this. There are some like massive overlaps. I have a lot of the ones that specifically overlap written down. So like the big one is like the god of the moon and the sun. His name is Luminous. It's the same god who's on both. That he represents both. He's like the god of the sun. His open eye is the sun. And like the eye of Luminous is upon you when the sun is out, and that the moon is his ass if he's mooning you.
Oh,
That's
wonderful.
kind of like the joke. And the god of war I have specifically named More, because that's the only
Okay.
thing he says to his worshippers is more.
Or nothing, I suppose, if they're asking the wrong question.
Yeah, like here's the skulls, god of war, more, more.
Here's some flowers, and then he just doesn't say anything.
Yeah, I don't think
Okay.
he responds well to flowers. It's usually people stabbing each other. I have Ram, the god of truth, justice, and freedom. He's primarily worshipped in Freeport. And the god Jubal, who's the god of festivals and wine. He's mostly worshipped by everybody.
Hmm.
But the more
Okay.
specific gods are like Grand Lord Orion, who was the first elf king. He founded like his dynasty in the Starlight Forest, and now he essentially forces all the elves who live there to acknowledge his lineage as divine. So it's not any kind of real god with power, but they call him the god.
Okay. That's a pretty complete list there. Yeah, one of the things that you'd mentioned was like all these different races came together on the final lands because of these apocalypses everywhere else.
Hmm.
Is there some sort of guiding story for why that's happening? Are the
Yeah,
gods
yeah.
involved?
That's part of the second half of the campaign. Which after we finish describing this continent, I'll get into because it's a major non sequitur compared to everything else.
Okay. Then yeah, let's get into the campaign events then. You said you've run it twice, is that right?
Twice to what I would consider the end, where like there's nothing more they could do, and the third time that I was trying to start when when I sent that email fell apart after like 2 sessions.
Hmm. Okay, gotcha.
But so the first group came out of Freeport, and they immediately fought to become like champions of this town. There was like a human cleric, dwarf monk, and elf wizard. I think a wizard or sorcerer. One of the just a magic class. It was the only class that was not martial, and they sought to get the permission from the Council of Burghers, which is the essentially the Congress of Freeport. Everyone gets together and votes.
Mhm.
They did a few like I want to call them like fetch quests, but they were essentially just go here, kill something, bring it back to get like the theme of what I was trying to go for down, because like
Right, right.
they were trying to have it be specific like a divinity campaign where they were going to do something and then kill the people who asked to get extra XP. And I was like, not working. We're doing something else. So they got the divine, quote unquote, divine right to go quest for the tower and
Okay.
try to get there. It's very impossible. Like so, um, so it's an island with the tower in the center, every nation you'd think just go straight to the center, really easy, right? Well, the
Yeah.
center is the wasteland that literally drains your life, and is also populated by dragons. One
Ooh.
of the major things that I have in my campaign is Dragonborn are not a race that live outside of the wasteland. The only Dragonborn and kobolds live in the wasteland under the rule of these dragons.
Okay. Are they affected by that life draining thing
No,
you were
no,
talking
they're
about?
like they live in like the shadow of the dragons, and they're fine.
Okay. Gotcha.
Each dragon has its own like loyalty. So like they're not the
Hmm.
dragons are fighting each other. So like the blue and the black dragon are fighting. The white dragon stays out of things. The gold dragon, tries and hoard as much gold as possible. Each dragon also like has a skill that like it teaches to its followers. And so specifically, these dragonborn can get really, really impressive powers, and even humans, after they train under the dragons, can get these powers that I call like the breath of the dragon, the claw of the dragon, that like improves their physical ability in ways that seem magical.
Okay.
But it was essentially like just an anime excuse to give people, the power to recover from wounds and punch boulders and stuff.
Okay. But I mean, it's supported by the like D&D, splat books too. Like
Hmm.
there's tons of ones that are about like dragons granting you power and getting stronger that way.
Hmm. But the dragons all defend like kind of they don't defend the tower inherently. It's just at the center of where they live. So to get to the tower, you at least have to fight and challenge a dragon. I was not going to let them reach the doors without confronting a dragon in some way. Um, so the first group where they had the human cleric, he got captured about halfway through by Blade's mercenaries, and they were going to, because he was very strong, they were going to involve him in the band of bastards and make him like fight for Thomas Blade. Well, he became very quote unquote traumatized and angry that like he was enslaved and like his family and stuff were being attacked. So
Hmm.
he became a paladin after being a cleric for 2 levels. He didn't multi-class. I let him completely remake into paladin, and he became one of the driving forces for the campaign as a very like moral center, and where his character had like this mission that he was going to accomplish to like free people from bad influences and like subjugation at the hands of others. So like extremely early on in the campaign, the group was like flagged down by this old man, and they were all handed these rocks that were relics that they glowed a specific color, and they would like pull toward each other. So if they got separated, they could find each other. And
Okay.
these rocks were important for the latter half of the campaign, as they kept them all the way till they went to the tower. As they got to the tower, uh, they had teamed up with a wounded dragon, the Azure Dragon. They had teamed up with him to fight the Black Dragon.
Oh, they're like specific
Hmm.
names, not like just a whole bunch or
They
something.
have like so they have a color, and then they have like a color or material dragon, and then they have like a true name that gives them power.
Hmm.
So the the Azure Dragon was fighting. He was like wounded, and they found him like on the outskirts of the wasteland. Was like, what's wrong? I'm being oppressed by I'm being oppressed by other dragons. Oh, let us help you. They healed him and then rode him into battle, essentially, which got the paladin killed. The first player kill I ever had, he essentially dropped onto the back of the dragon, and the dragon kind of um, like fell over and crushed him.
Okay.
So this was maybe 3 sessions from what I would call like the end of the campaign, and his character completely was killed, and I was like, okay, well we can work around this. This event happens every 2 years, so we kind of rewrote his backstory where he had a son who was essentially the same character, and the whole party came back 2 years later and started the exact same spot.
Of course. All right.
So they didn't kill the dragon; they only wounded it and made it flee. But that let them get into the tower and solve a few punishment, or I call them punishments because they were very cruel puzzles. But they get to the top of the tower and prepare to make their wish. They step into the light, and the rocks they had been given by the old man like start to glow really strongly and kind of short circuit the ritual. Suddenly, where they were in the light at the top of a crystal tower, they emerge onto what looks like an alien starship full of strange devices and giant spindly like translucent creatures. And they
Hmm.
look, and they're all standing around this dais which has like this orb in the center, and in the orb
Okay.
they can see their world with the island right at the top. They immediately ask like, what's going on, and the alien comes and like speaks to them like in their minds, and is like, you're not supposed to be here, you escaped your containment. uh, they ask what the containment is for. These beings are called the First, and they are created. They're essentially like godlike beings with like infinite creative potential, but they needed like technology in order to survive like the dimension they were in. So they created
Hmm.
like technology powered by the essentially the worship and belief of humans, or not humans, like humanoid creatures.
Okay.
So they have essentially like worlds in bottles, like as batteries for like spaceships and lasers and air conditioning and stuff.
My battery is leaking.
So like they're like, what the heck? Why did you get out of your battery? And they take a second and explain what's going on. And the paladin immediately goes, "This is slavery on a worldwide scale." Smash, destroys the orb. And at first I was like, okay, well, you're going to team up and you're going to do something, and there's a whole other storyline here. And he's like, okay, well, now you're at war. Like, and I went through the rest of the campaign where essentially this party was like the xenomorph in Aliens, where they went around like not liberating worlds, but like destroying the infrastructure of these people,
Right.
and ended with them going to like this sanctuary where all the major beings of the First live, and destroying the battery that essentially powered their entire civilization. And I was like, all right, the lights go off and the world is over. You destroyed reality.
Yeah, I feel like that's not so much like ending slavery. You're just, yeah, killing everybody.
But that's kind of how it was like. That's how it was in his mind. So the second campaign with I think it was only like one different person, went a little better. Well, when they finally got to that part, they actually tried to solve the issues that the First were having. The First are beings created by a singular god entity who gave them all this creative power. And then while the beings were, looking down, creating the world that God had told them to create, he disappeared. And the First were left to kind of organize everything themselves. So they organized into several groups. There's the Alphas, who try to bring God back through like worship and creation of entities with souls who will worship in turn. So like the reason they have gods in the little worlds in the bottles is because the First want their God back, their father.
Oh, okay.
There's
Gotcha. I was gonna ask about that.
mhm, there's the betas who are essentially, I named them all kind of tongue in cheek. There's the betas who kind of like are subservient to the alphas and want to help them in any way they can. There's the omegas who want to kind of end the cycle, and
Hmm.
then there's gammas who kind of do their own thing. And this was before Sigma Male, unfortunately, or I would have named some of them Sigmas.
Okay. Well, I mean, I guess my question for that aspect of the campaign is, how do they make it possible for someone to escape the simulation? That feels like something that
That's what those.
like the programmer should have complete control over.
Yeah. So there's the only other force besides the First in the primordial dimension are these things called nulls. They are essentially areas of blank space where nothing can exist. And the old man who gave the party those stones that let them break the simulation was a being of the null, and that was sent into the simulation to try to essentially mess with how it goes. And this is happening like essentially on every civilization, but they were the first one to succeed. And the other major thing about the first is that they have no capacity for violence. They cannot cast any kind of offensive magic. They can't punch, kick, or hit each other. The only first who have ever died were consumed by nulls, where they're like their
Okay.
being was like dissolved in like this area of like essentially forced blankness.
Interesting.
hmm It's like so they don't. They're like, oh, the null is just like this phenomenon, but they're really like beings that have a desire to like essentially wipe out everything that currently is and make everything blank. So the null was
Okay.
influencing the party to leave the sphere and then to not not to kill everyone like the first party did, but to
Uh-huh.
assist the first in one of their aspects of either bringing back God or destroying God. So the second party ended up like teaming up with the Omegas as they had a plan to subvert the power of all the orbs that was powering things. They were going to let all the people free, which is much
Okay.
more of a way to essentially end the use of these orbs as like power and like the subjugation of soul bearing species. They were going to
Mhm.
essentially like remove them all from the grid without destroying them. And
Okay.
the reason God had left was because the first had gotten too cocky and had developed species that could worship them back. Like, and that's the theory of why things went wrong, and that's what the Omegas wanted to kind of correct.
Okay. That makes sense for how they were able to escape then, sort of sabotage, I guess would be one way of looking at
hmm
it. So what were the Nulls thinking the like alternate power source would be for their nation?
Uh,
Was there a idea there?
no, they thought that if they got rid of the what they called it enslavement, just because I wanted to make that line work. If they got rid of the enslavement, that God would be happy and come back.
Oh,
And that
okay.
he
I
left
see.
because he was upset that they made these beings that worshiped them in return.
Okay, now I understand. Sorry, I was
Yeah,
not quite getting it before.
it's like
Okay.
a golden cow kind of thing.
Right. Yeah, can't have that false idol.
hmm And so I had they essentially introduced how to what murder was, and they had to explain what killing someone was like because they were all very
Oh yeah, because
confused.
they're non-violent.
hmm
Okay. So these firsts are kind of like almost like angels in that they're like,
Yeah, they're
I mean, I guess biblical angels do understand violence, but like a perfect being that
mhm.
doesn't even understand that concept.
Yeah, and they don't have like a set physical appearance. They have the power of like ultimate creation, so they all look vastly different. And like even if they're like big hulked out alien monstrosities, they don't have the need to like everything. Like, they don't eat. They don't really do anything else. They just kind of exist and create. And as long as there are beings out there that see them as their creator, then they're good.
So you ran the campaign twice. Was there any difference like in the initial part
Yeah,
before they got to the Soul
yeah,
Forge up to
yeah. The
that?
second party started as two dwarves and a human in the dwarf settlement, which is called the Last Hold, where the dwarves of Brieger hide, and they kind of are very isolated. They have sealed their gates permanently, so the only way to get in to the hold is to be taken through a secret door by a dwarf. I kind of went
Hmm.
with the whole Tolkien thing where like dwarves are like dwarf doors are invisible. They have these massive underway tunnels that they kind of go where they
Right.
need to go, and they're kind of exclusionary to everyone else. In
Okay.
there's
Yeah.
all these kind of like goblin and like orc and human tribes living in the mountains above. So they're like, yeah, we don't want any of that. They're super exclusionary, and the campaign started by the two dwarves on patrol finding like a wounded human and like, oh, we should really take him back to help to heal him, guys. This would be so cruel if we just let him out here to die. But the leaders of the clan were like, how dare you bring a human in here? Gasp! You're all banished.
Yeah.
And so like, well, if we're banished, I guess we'll go adventure. And then as they were adventuring, the event started and the trial started, and they were like, well, we can.
Right.
They ended up going to Freeport as well and becoming the champions of there because that's by far the most expanded city I have. Um, they in this is where some of the differences in the campaigns came, because like the first campaign had a very powerful wizard who was kind of like, I didn't like the character I made for him. He was very aloof and kind of goofy. But the second time, I gave the wizard a dwarf companion who was like this master engineer who built like a clockwork castle that flew above the city. They also named him Rykard the Wizard because he was a very sexy wizard who would he was a celebrity in the
Of
town,
course.
and like every 2 weeks he would come down from the castle to like attend the council meetings and stuff, and like all the women were like, oh. I there's that one.
Record.
It's from I think Avatar: The Last Airbender, where the guy who like screams and foams at the mouth and passes out. I would play that clip
Yeah,
every
the Water
time
Tribe.
Record
Yes.
was introduced.
I think he's even like in the credits as like foaming at the
They knew
mouth
what
guy.
they were doing.
Yep.
I also had a fishmonger who got his fish destroyed over time and was like, "My fish!"
Oh no.
Yeah, that happened at least twice, I remember. But they get to this clockwork castle, and the council of burgers are like, "Oh, we don't want to send you guys to. You're not from here. We're not going to send you to go be our champions. We have the dwarf in the Clockwork Castle. He's building an army of golems, and he's going to protect us, no problem." And so they're like, "Well, we have." The party came up with the idea of they were going to not frame, but kind of like slander the dwarf to make everybody think he was a bad guy because they had like information that he was like secretly using the
Okay.
golems to like protect the wizard and not like the town itself. So they tried to essentially undermine his position and got some very powerful relics from the wizard that they then took to the tower, which was very very interesting. They got this shield that actually it was a shield of -8 armor class. It had -2 AC. If you took a hit with the shield,
Huh.
the shield also gave them bludgeoning, slashing resistance and stuff. It dealt the resistance damage
Okay.
back to whatever enemy hit them.
Okay. So it makes it
Reflect
easier
damage.
to be hit, but it has. Okay.
It was
All right.
I was
That's
very
cool.
happy when I came up with that idea because especially when you have like martial dwarves, like fighter and sword and shield dwarfs, they can get really high AC really quick, like level like 20 AC
Yes.
by
Yeah, definitely.
level 3.
Yeah. Full plate and shield's pretty easy.
Yeah, plate armor dwarves with shield can get beefy. So I was like, his dwarf was also a very like Slayer type dwarf from like Warhammer, where like he's like
Uh-huh.
willing to get into combat and really take hits. So I'm like, well, I'm gonna lean into this really hard. Another thing that I did that is not usual that I haven't done in many other campaigns was I had custom like skill trees and talents for each character. I would have this system I would call hero points, where every session everyone got one hero point, and for every natural 20 they got another. And they could take these hero points and invest them into these special skills that usually had to go along with their background or racial class and that kind of stuff. That gave them extra skills. I would have
Right.
it in like a spreadsheet. It would look like something for divinity, where like they had a skill tree like get this skill leads to this skill leads to this skill, and we did that, and that was something I put a
Right.
lot of
Right.
time into because I really wanted to make it special.
Yeah. Did you feel like that worked well for fifth
It
edition?
did not work well for fifth edition. It worked well for fourth edition, and I also didn't work well because I'm very bad at
Uh-huh.
balancing. I want to give my players something fun to do. Like it's not it is fun to have a really challenging encounter, but I also want them to be able to play like the role that their character wanted to play. Like I gave some of them taunts when their characters wouldn't have taunts usually. Extra dodges or ranged attacks that they wouldn't have usually. So it just added like a few extra little fun bits to the campaign, as then I had to try to backload the difficulty onto the second half with like a few weak encounters, then one encounter that's really really hard.
Okay. That feels like a problem that kind of every DM
I
has
I
one
find
way
that
or another.
the CR system just doesn't always calculate what players have at their fingertips. They can do a lot of things to make high CR enemies kind of useless.
Yeah, I mean, part of that is there's that thing where like when you're designing an encounter, if it's just one monster, you're supposed to like half the XP because they can like wolf pack it.
I've I stopped doing XP per monster very early on into my campaigns because I just found it's
Right.
hard to keep track of, especially when like someone's going to miss a session and then you have to do the XP for everybody else differently. So most of my campaigns we've just gone
Mhm.
by milestones.
Yeah. I've grown to like that as well. It's just I don't know. There's a lot of math that goes into XP that doesn't necessarily pay off because you're still going to try and like have them level at the end of every adventure. If you just say, okay, it's the end of the adventure, you guys level up, you get the same effect without any of the work.
Necessarily, yeah. Especially when it's early levels and you can just hand them, kind of hand them out for little achievements and it not completely change how things play. Like later on, once you start handing people like really high level spells,
Right.
it gets rough. Like we never got above level 12 in our campaign because I didn't want to push it
Hmm.
to like a really high level where they had these insane meteor storms and that kind of stuff. I kept it like they were the most powerful, people from essentially on that island by the end, but they still weren't higher than level 12.
I mean, it depends on like the power scaling, but like level 12 can be really powerful. I think there was this article a long time ago by the Alexandrian that like level 5 is realistically about as powerful as someone can get in the real world. So having that as your upper limit is already
Well,
entering
I
into
mean, there are
fantasy.
dragons and wizards.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So I mean, it's a fantasy game. We can have a
Hmm.
little bit of fantasy as part of it.
All right, I think that's all I have basically.
Yeah. Well, do you have any DMing advice that you would want to give other people?
Yeah, I think because I was listening to some of the episodes yesterday and I was really thinking about what I wanted to say for this. I was going to say for when you're DMing and you don't want to run a module, which I don't like modules. I know a lot of people who do, but I don't. Tell the story that you
Hmm.
want to tell and that the people at your table want to hear. So if there's a problem at your table with people being murder hobos or acting in a way that's not congruent with the tone of the story or the campaign world, try to change the story to make that behavior fit with the campaign. Like maybe have a villain story
Hmm.
where everyone's evil alignment and does evil things, or have a campaign specifically designed around a certain aspect and not try to accom- um, accommodate everyone's play style and thing into the same homogenous story. Like make it special. Don't feel like you have to be at the whims of your players all the time.
Hmm. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It's you're one of the players too.
Like the cussing is have fun is that's a given. We're all playing a game here. We want to have fun and tell. I just think telling stories that you want to tell and not be a human processor for a video game you're all relatively agreed to join into.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, you're saying that's how you sold it initially, but then you had to
Hmm.
change to milestone XP,
Yeah,
so they stopped just killing random people.
games have taught people bad lessons,
All right, yeah, yeah, that's good advice. Yeah, I think there's some very good lessons from video games and other ones that do not carry over well
and
to other.
people who like play any kind of RPG or Skyrim or anything, and they think that D&D is just so beyond them because it requires books and math and paper. It's not. It's not that hard. It's not that intimidating. Anyone can do it if you have a spark of creativity and a desire to tell a story.
Hmm. Well, yeah, thank you very much, Colonel.
Yeah, no
Yeah, it was
problem.
great talking with you. We're still looking for people to interview, so if you or someone you know might want to appear on the podcast, please let them know. Our web address is gocorral gocorral.com/STS. GOCORRAL.com/STS. Thank you.